Our next speaker, who's going to talk about thriving in retail's new era, balancing cost, customer, and brand. From January Digital, Sarah Engel.
I'm Sarah Engel. I'm the president of January Digital and January Consulting. So I will give you the very brief backgrounder so that it makes sense what I'm talking about. January Digital is a digital agency of record for folks like Carhartt and Kendra Scott and Josie Marin, a lot of fashion brands, a lot of beauty, Steve Madden, folks like that. I spent about half my career on the brand side, and most recently was the head of marketing for Lilly Pulitzer, which is a women's fashion brand. I think the women in the house will know, and all our Floridians. And so just, I say that because, and our entire consulting team came from the brand side like I did. I say that because when I talked with Jason, I talked with Matt Carver, who's the nicest guy in the industry. They said, talk to us about what's going on in retail, what the challenges are right now. So the point of our conversation is what the challenges are. And it actually wanted to start with a story. So in November of 2020, we're in the midst, the real midst of COVID. Many of you, I know, were in the trenches then as well, on the brand side. And stores are closed, people are struggling. It was a tough time in this industry. We get to November of 2020, right? We're trying to send packages out. You're doing anything you can to protect the distribution center. Like all of a sudden the corporate folks are like, go home, don't touch the distribution center, you gotta protect it. FedEx stops picking up. UPS stops picking up. USPS stops picking up. They're all overwhelmed. And we see packages stacking up, stacking up, stacking up. We're overwhelmed, right? And so at some point, I don't know how many days into this, basic catastrophe of your business, which, was happening across the industry, I picked my head up and I made a phone call to a very dear friend who is at Eddie Bauer across the country. And I said, are you having this? Is FedEx picking your packages up? Not mine either. Started calling around. It was all of us. Everybody was having the same challenge, right? And we were so isolated at that time that we didn't know anybody else was having the same challenge. And so I share that story to say, as soon as we started talking, it was this regional carrier's working, give them a call. Okay, this is the customer communication that's working. Some of the workarounds were things like send packages from your distribution center to your store, because FedEx will come to your store and get 40 packages. I mean, that's how desperate people were, right? But we started sharing those ideas. We started determining, how are we going to overcome these challenges? And so when I talked to Jason and talked to Matt about the challenges right now, which are different but are no less intense, I think some of the biggest challenges I hear on a daily, weekly basis are around rising costs, around the shifting needs and expectations of your customers, and around the balance and debates between performance and brand building. And so I'll talk a little about each one of those. From a rising cost of business perspective, obviously, higher interest rates, the cost of capital is much higher. And a board member recently said to me, which I thought was funny, he said, money is not free anymore. Every decision's got to be scrutinized. Anything that impacts your margin, you've got to think through heavily. So we went through this, era during early COVID where we were just throwing everything out to see what would work, to see what customers wanted. All of a sudden that came back to us, and it's, all right, now I got to protect margin, and it can't be and, right? And so I think the good thing about that, I will always find a positive, which is these are universal challenges. There's nobody you're competing with that isn't dealing with the same rising costs, number one. So we're in the same boat. Number two, I think it's brought about some really interesting creativity in the industry, new products, new categories, new partnerships. I don't know about you, but I did not think the Taco Bell crock was going to happen, nor would it sell out, but it did, right? And so it brought about some really creative new ideas in the industry. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the evolving demands of our customers. So you can't talk about customer expectation without talking about shipping. We have to talk about it first, right? They expect reliable, fast, free. My mom, I don't know where he went, but we were just talking about a minute ago. My mom lives in very rural Texas, and she will often say to me, why can't my favorite brand get it to me tomorrow? Amazon can get it here tomorrow. That is the expectation. It should be able to get here tomorrow if Amazon can do it. So that's just a reality of the situation. The biggest thing I wanted to speak to, and Matt mentioned it briefly as well, is promotions and discounts. It is more competitive, more complex than it's ever been. And I would just say promotions are a drug. The industry is addicted to them. Customers are addicted to them. It is a major issue that's impacting a lot of businesses. And when you think about it that way, you have to reset how your organization looks at promotions, right? So as you head into 2025 planning, the only way I have seen this work, and I've done this with many, many companies, is for it to be aligned all the way to the top. So you go into 25 planning and you say, how many days were we on promo in 24? What are we willing to settle for in 25? Like it is as large of a goal as a lot of your other financial goals you'll talk about on a Monday morning. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands. I think we have enough brand folks, if not your clients, who had less promo days in 24 than they did in 23? Anybody have less promo days? Okay, I was going to have you talk to each other. Oh, there's one, yes. Okay, go talk to her later. Come talk to me later. There are solutions for this. And, I think that we're in a situation right now where the more customer data we have, the more understanding that we have, the better we're going to be able to answer their needs without always pulling the discount lever, always pulling the promo lever, right? Does she actually want, is it about a 30% off? Does she need 30% off and free shipping? Maybe. Maybe you've conditioned her to want that. If you really understand your customer, is it more about, I want early access to new products. I want sampling opportunities like I get from Sephora. I want loyalty points that I can turn in for something I really care about. It is a long journey to get off that drug, and I'll tell you right now, it will take you 18 months. So I wanted to bring that up. I think it's important with this room to have that conversation. The last thing I wanted to talk about was balancing your immediate sales with your long-term brand equity. We do a lot of brand and performance marketing, so it's funny for me to say, but the reality of the situation is performance is measurable, it's quick. It is also not going to solve everything in your business. And so a lot of businesses right now, I would say I've probably had this conversation 7 or 8 times in the last month. People who ran after performance, who spent so much money from a Meta and Google perspective, it was working, until it wasn't working as well. And in that process, they didn't build a brand. So now people are trying to, reconfigure, what am I going to do? How am I going to build a brand? There's a couple of things to say. First of all, I'll use Nike as the example. It's very public, so I don't feel like I'm sharing anybody's business. But Nike's brand value dropped from $109 billion to $71 billion in the last 2 years. So when you think about that, there's many things, right? Their wholesale strategy, which was very public, and they talked a lot about shifting their wholesale strategy, now shifting back, reorganize some of their departments. There were plenty of changes that happened. But one of the largest things that they've pointed to and have said publicly is that they shifted away from brand marketing, shifted only into performance, and in that process really gave up a lot of ground for competitors to come in and build brands. And there's a former Nike exec, I'm actually going to read it to you because it's his quote, but I thought it was interesting. He said, Nike invested billions of dollars into something that was less effective but easier to be measured versus something that was more effective but less easy to be measured. And they're certainly riding that ship now, are working really hard on that. But that's just probably the biggest example that's very public in the industry. But it is true, like I said, I've had that conversation 7 or 8 times in the last month, is how can I build a brand while still performing? Building a brand is the long game, and boards of directors and the stock market are not patient for the long game. So I acknowledge that. What I would say is a couple of things. One is the brands that I've seen have the most success, and the folks that we've worked with, it is a blend. You're not all of a sudden shutting one down or pushing too hard in one direction. It's a constant blend. That requires you to have new KPIs. So those Monday morning meetings, everybody's used to looking at the same thing, whether it's a 10-year-old brand or a 100-year-old brand like some we work with. But you really need to have everybody aligned to what the new KPIs are, right? Because your brand building activities are not going to show up in the same way that your performance metrics are. And so that type of blend is working very well. But you have to have your whole organization kind of organized around them and aligned to them. One of the processes that we've been through a lot, sometimes you're explaining to your marketing or e-commerce team what those new KPIs are. Most of the time you're educating your executives and your board on it. So yeah, it's great that you're building a brand and we're all in favor of that and the creative looks beautiful right until I don't get sales overnight. And then I don't want to talk about that anymore. And so it is an education process you have to go through. So we've talked through rising costs. We've talked through shifting customer expectations. We've talked through performance and brand building. I think there's countless other challenges that we're facing. Some of them that I'm hearing, we can certainly talk about it throughout the day, is the new customer acquisition just strangling retention right now. I'm talking to so many people who are having such a hard time in retention. It's like kind of like loyalty's back. We're going to talk about loyalty again, but the good news is we're talking about it in a different way. So I'm certainly happy to talk with you all about that. But I guess what I would say is, like November of 2020, when I finally lifted my head up and was like, everybody's challenged with these things. It's not just us, talk to each other. So I guess I would just encourage everybody through the rest of the day, like, have those conversations. Somebody in this room is having the same challenge. Somebody in this room has solved it, or at least figured out a little piece that you might be able to take forward. And I guarantee you that your neighbors around you are having a lot of those same challenges. So, together, I believe we can really thrive in this industry. I love retail. I love e-commerce. I am very positive about it, very bullish about it. It's never been more creative. We've never had an opportunity to do some of the things that we can right now. So just want to encourage everybody to talk to each other, come talk to me. We can solve this together. Thanks for having me, guys.